All right, hello everybody. It is me, Blake, and I am here. I'm going to be doing an interview with, this is a big interview, with former WWE, WCW, WWF, ECW, NWA, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Japan Noah, All Japan Wrestling, and so much more wrestler. He is known under many names, but his most known name is Bull Buchanan. Bull Buchanan. He is the father of current NXT wrestler Brooks Jensen, who was in former tag team with Josh Briggs on NXT. So I'm just gonna wait until he gets on in here and it might be a little bit because I don't usually do the interviews here on Facebook, so it's a little bit to get. Oh, there they are. There he is.
Hey,
Hello, sir.
how are you?
I'm doing good. How are
I'm
you?
good. I'm good.
So, mind if you introduce yourself?
Um, I'm Bull Buchanan. Wrestled in WWE from I think maybe '97 till 2003. Uh, Worked over in Japan after that, um, and yeah, just uh, another guy in this town.
All right, so I'll start off by asking you my first question. When did you start doing wrestling and what made you want to do it?
Um, I started. I think I was 20, 23 or 24. I'd watched him all my life. I'd been a fan since I was a little kid, and there happened to be some guys that were doing some indie shows here in my hometown. I went there and talked to them, and they started training me, and I just kind of took off from there. But yeah, I think I was 24 or 25. It was 90 or 91, I think, when I started.
Yeah. When you watched wrestling as a kid, who was your favorite wrestler growing up?
I guess to start with, I watched Georgia Championship Wrestling. I found that, and I started watching that. So Tommy Rich wrestling too, Bob Armstrong, those guys, and then I kind of branched out and found some of the other promotions like World Class, Mid South. So I got into the Von Erichs, Freebirds, Magnum TA. They were all guys that I watched. As I started getting older, uh, I watched I watched a lot of Magnum TA, Barry Windham, those guys, and I was always a fan of Terry Gordy. So yeah, but I guess my first two were Tommy Rich and Mr. Wrestling too. Those were the first I really got into, and they just kind of snowballed from there.
Hmm. Who is your favorite wrestler to watch nowadays, besides like your son?
Um, I don't know that I can narrow it down to one. Randy Orton is well, John, of course, Cena, but he's kind of in and out now. I've always
Yeah.
been a Randy Orton fan. I think he's probably the most well-rounded uh, performer they have now. I mean, he can just do it all, in the ring, on the mic, and he's so smooth to watch him work. I'm a big Sheamus fan. I like guys that are big and laid in. So him and Drew McIntyre, all the Samoans, because they were so good to me when I got in the business. Rikishi, always looked out for me up there, and Eki and Rosie. When they come over to Japan, I got to be friends with them. So yeah, all the Usos. I've known those guys since they were kids. You know, it's funny watching them now because I remember seeing them little kids running around. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But you know, those guys. I like to watch the smaller guys too. I really like watching the smaller guys in NXT. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was a big William Regal fan. The guy that trained me was a big William Regal fan, and so I was too. I enjoy watching his son, Charlie Dempsey. Enjoy watching him. Um, but Ben's partner, I'm a big fan. I saw Josh Briggs. I saw him before. I think before he ever signed with WWE when he was in Evolve. Uh, I watched a lot of him. So yeah, that's some of them.
Yeah. Who were your wrestling trainers?
Um, a guy named James Hammonds. He wrestled around here as Olin James. Um, they were putting on wrestling shows here in my town, and I got the guts to go over there and talk to them, and found out there was a few guys in there that I knew that lived in the same town I did. So getting in wasn't as hard as it might have been for somebody else. But James was a big old guy. He was 6'4", 6'5", pushing 300 pounds, and but he's the one that trained me. But like everybody else, you start getting out. You learn from a lot of different people, but it always amazed me, how much James knew about the business, and he was never I don't know if he really even intended to ever really get out and travel a whole bunch. He already had he was older, he already had a family and everything, but just like everybody else, he'd always dreamed of doing it, and yeah, I mean he taught me the fundamentals and the basics, and that's what I based everything else off of.
Yeah, definitely. Is it anybody that inspired you family wise? If so, who?
I'm sorry, say again.
Is there anybody that like inspired you family wise to get
Oh,
into the
yeah,
business?
yeah. Oh, well, my mom and dad. My dad, he would always watch wrestling with me, and I don't know if it was because he really liked wrestling that much, or he just enjoyed, our time together. But he used to take me to the shows in Carrollton, Georgia, which was a part of the Georgia Championship. Part of their they were there on Saturday nights, I think, and so he would take me to the shows, and he just uh, he never encouraged, and that didn't necessarily encourage it, but he didn't discourage it either. He just left it up to me. I
Mm-hmm.
remember coming in and telling him, hey, I'm gonna train to be a wrestler, and I think he thought it was pretty cool. But I got to he got to come and see a lot of my stuff when I was in Smoky Mountain. When I wasn't riding with Tommy and Brad, he would ride with me up there just for one or two shows. So we got to spend a lot of time together, and I got to he got to go with me down to Columbus on a WWE house show. I think maybe in 2002, and come backstage and introduce him to everybody. Uh, my mom, my parents were older, so my mom couldn't get out that much, get around as easy as my dad could.
Yeah.
She used to come watch me some when I first started. She usually watched me on TV after that.
Yeah. Who has been the stiffest wrestler you've gone in the ring with so far in your career?
My son. I mean, I'm no joke. Uh, so we did a little angle in Anarchy Wrestling down here in Georgia. A lot of people remember it as Wild Side Wrestling. It's been here forever, since the late '90s, and we did kind of a father versus son thing, and I taught him to lay it in, and then we actually had a match, and Jesus, I started wondering if I'd create a monster, but no, you know, and I don't, when somebody says laying it in or being stiff, I don't necessarily equate that as a bad thing. Probably one of the, but I enjoyed working him more than anybody was Kensuke Sasaki over in Japan. He was the fill-in road warrior, the power warrior over there when Hawk and Animal had their little whatever it was back in the 90s. But I worked him a lot in All Japan, and I worked him a lot in Noah, and I always enjoyed the matches with him. John Bradshaw is another one, JBL. Um,
Mm.
you know, it was nice. You know, he never complained about getting hit hard. He'd hit you hard back, and you know, it was just I enjoyed that style of work a little more.
Yeah. Were you ever in school or amateur wrestling as a kid?
No, we didn't even have an amateur wrestling program until I think I was a senior. Um, so had they have had it earlier, I would have loved to. But I played basketball and actually had a chance to go to college and play, so I couldn't really give that up. To
Yeah.
get I knew I'd probably get a scholarship in basketball. But yeah, we didn't even have a wrestling team back then. It's amazing how far, time goes by. Now, my high school, Bowden High School here in Bowden, Georgia, they got a real good wrestling team. And the little town over in Ramburn where Ben, both my sons go to school, uh, they've got a wrestling team that's contended for the state title for 2-3 years in a row. And back when I was in school, they didn't even have that. So that's a big thing I push on people. I didn't really get a chance to do it, but Brooks Jensen, Ben, my son, he was a state champion. My other son, Zach, he'll be a senior this year. He's probably going to win a state championship in that. So, and I push that on guys won't get in the business because when you break it all down, when you boil it all down, it all comes back to the wrestling. When
Yeah,
I'm training
definitely.
guys, I try to tell them, hey, if you get lost or if you get what you're doing, go back to your amateur stuff. You know,
Hmm. What do you consider to be your weakness and strengths in wrestling?
mine.
Yep.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, what do you consider to be your weakness and strengths in wrestling?
Well, my weakness was definitely be as a businessman. Uh, I always wanted to do this. I didn't want to do anything else. Um, so I always looked at it as I've always looked at it as a job. I think you have to because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Somebody's paying you to perform and they expect to get their money's worth out of you. But at the same time, I've got so much passion for this and I wanted to do it and I've loved it so much, that of course there's been times that I've done it for free, and I don't, definitely my business sense is probably my weakness. I think my strength has always been, I was never Shawn Michaels or anybody like that, but I had some springs in my legs and I was good at. I had a lot of athletic ability, and I tried to parlay that into my wrestling. But I watched a lot of Booker T and Billy Gunn when I first got in the business. I watched a lot of that, and I just, it kind of hit me that the kind of evolution of big guys, is going toward, guys that can move and do stuff that they didn't do in the past. And I watched Booker T, of course, the scissor kick and some of his stuff. And Billy Gunn was such an athlete. I watched those two, and I figured, I think I could use my athletic ability to a real advantage. Of course, my size, but I think that would
Yeah.
probably be my strength.
Hmm. Was it hard traveling from show to show, and what was the worst thing about that?
No, I love the travel. That was one of the greatest things to me, just seeing somewhere you had never seen before. Um, I mean, it can be a hassle sometimes. You get hung up on flights and stuff like that. Nobody wants to do that, but I always enjoyed seeing, going somewhere I hadn't been. Even the places, you go to repeatedly, it's still. I look back now and I wish I took more pictures because
Yeah.
some of the places I'll probably never see again.
Hmm.
But no, I always enjoyed the traveling. I had a lot of good riding partners. From the time I got in the business, one of my best friends, got in at the same time I did. Bulldog Reigns used to wrestle down in Memphis at Power Pro. And we'd make these shows all around the South, and then Smoky Mountain. I rode. Tommy Rich lives down here where I do, so me and Tommy rode together, and Brad Armstrong would get in with us, and so we just have a great time, and just as it goes, I got to the WWF and the Truth Commission. My partners in the Truth Commission, we always rode together, and me and Boss Man when I was with Ray. RTC comes along. I jumped in with Charles, Godfather, and Teddy Long, and there toward the end, I think I was riding with Shelton Benjamin and Devon Dudley, and they were all good riding partners. We just had fun. It was
Yeah.
fun. Get up in the morning and head out on a 2 or 3 hour road trip. Just shoot shit in the car and listen to crank some tunes and just enjoy it.
Hmm. Who was your first opponent in front of a crowd, and how did you feel going into that first match?
My first match was with my trainer Olin James, and I think we was in Heflin, Alabama. I was scared to death. I was literally scared to death. I remember walking out through the crowd, and I was a baby face, and I remember walking out the crowd, and people were trying to shake my hand, and I was so scared. I kept my hands down on the side, and I kept my head down, and I got in the ring, and like I said, I got the guy that trained me, so I had the utmost confidence that he knew what he was doing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just trusted that he did, and he led me through it, and we got through it, and had a good match, and went on and wrestled a bunch afterwards.
Yeah. Is or was like your top dream opponent?
Uh, hey, that's a good one. Nobody's asked me that. Um, it'd be hard to say, but I remember a couple that really stood out to me. Was getting to work with Barry Windham when him and John were doing the new Blackjacks. Getting
Mm.
to work with Barry Windham, getting to work with the Road Warriors. Um, you I mean, those were guys I watched when I was, growing up. I won't say I was a kid, teenager or whatever, but yeah, those two really stand out for me. Um, I mean, it's been an honor to work all the, think of all the names that I've got to work with, all the legends, all the guys that are in the Hall of Fame, stuff like that. But yeah, those two really stood out to me. Getting to work with Barry Windham because I watched, I was about the same size, and I watched how smooth he was in the ring. And even after I got in the business, and then found out kind of how things work, I was even more impressed with and when I trained Ben, I had him watch a lot of Barry Windham, a lot of Terry Gordy, just how smooth they are in the ring.
Hmm. If you could go back in time and wrestle anyone that has passed away, who would that be?
Uh, well, I mean, I don't know about passed away, but I would love to have gotten to work Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Just love to have got. I actually got to do. I got to work with Tommy Rich. I mean, we rode together, we tagged together. We did everything together. And I actually got to do something with wrestling too. He had already retired and went to Hawaii, but he came back and had a little involvement in our match, one of the indie shows here in Georgia. Um, You know, I would love to have worked Luthez.
Mm.
Um, you know, I don't know. That's pretty. You got some good questions. Uh, somebody I would love to have worked that that, passed away before their time was Bruce Brody.
Mm.
I
Yep.
would love to. Another guy I was a big fan of. Another big guy that could just move and was so agile. Uh, yeah, love to have got to work with Brody.
Hmm. Who is someone you would like to wrestle that you've wrestled before?
Uh, I'd love to. Of course, I mean, totally hypothetical because I don't know if either one of us is in shape to do it anymore. But I would love to. I'd love to work the Godfather again. We tagged more than we worked each other, but the few matches we had, I felt like we just had a good chemistry there. Because we're both big. Charles is a monster. I mean, he was at the time he was legit 300 pounds and just solid. But I always thought we had good matches, and I always had fun working him. It was so easy, with him as the Godfather. I mean, it didn't matter who I was or what I was doing. He was so over with the crowd, that as soon as you stepped in the ring, you had the crowd right in the palm of your hand with him.
Who is your three top favorite opponents so far in your career?
Well, Godfather, of course, yeah, guys I've worked against, Muda. I don't know. There's so many Japanese guys I got to work with over there that were so, all of them legends, and getting to work with Muda, getting to work with um, uh, Kensuke Sasaki. I mean, all those Japanese guys. But yeah, I really enjoyed working with Muda. We did a lot of stuff with him over there. And he was so smooth in the ring. I remember, and this was in the early 2000s, but I remember, him having to have his knees taped up. They would probably spend 2 rolls of tape on his knees because they were so shot, but he would get in the ring and you'd never know it. He would still just pop up to the top rope and do the moonsault. And, it was a pleasure working him. Masawa, God, I mean, he was. We went to Noah. We got to work Masawa a lot. Kobashi, always enjoyed working him. So it'd be hard to narrow it down just to even 5 or 6 guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just some of them.
hmm Do you usually get along or become friends with most of your opponents?
Yeah, that's I don't know that I've ever really, had a crossword or really had any heat with anybody in the business. And and if I did, I always tried to, go back and fix whatever it was. I don't want to leave anybody with any bad feelings. Uh, but yeah, I think when there's always egos involved. Everybody's got an ego. I got one too. Um, but yeah, I've always, all the people I've worked with and even worked against, I really can't remember, you know, well, there might have been 1 or 2 times, but I can't ever really remember, being really mad at somebody or anything like that. Like I said, if it did happen, hopefully I went back and, you know, made amends of whatever it was.
Yeah. If you could make a Survivor Series match, including you, with four current wrestlers from any company, who would you choose as partners?
Well, I kind of go out on a limb here, but you know, um, my son Brooks Jensen, of course, would be one of my partners. My youngest son now, Zach, he started wrestling. He's 17. He'll be a senior this year. But he's already had a handful of matches, and he's wrestling tomorrow night in for Southern Honor in Woodstock, Georgia, which is one of the big companies down here. They're having their one of their big shows, so he's working for them. So he'd be the other partner, and I guess I'd have to go with my old partner, the one that I've tagged with probably more than anybody, D'Lo Brown.
Mm,
Me and D'Lo tagged. We knew each other from Smoky Mountain, and we worked together there, and we worked together in New York. And then when we went to Japan, we were almost totally a tag team most of the time. So yeah, me and, D'Lo, and the boys, I guess, would be my team.
yeah. Would you rather be in a street fight or a death match?
Uh, I never really did the death match stuff. Um, Probably a street fight. Been in tons of those. It's it's easy to do. I mean, you don't even have to wear trunks or anything. You just kind of show up as you are and go fight.
Yeah.
But I've always had fun with those matches because I remember when I was a kid and growing up. And back then, this is the '70s and '80s. When they said street fight, I mean, you knew it was. Yeah, they took it to a whole nother level. It was wasn't done all the time, and when it was done, you knew you were going to see something. So, yeah, street fight, I guess. And I was always a big fan of the Freebirds.
Hmm.
So that was kind of their thing too. So,
Would you rather be in a blindfold match, handcuffed to your opponent, or a dog collar?
uh, probably a blindfold match because the dog collar, man, I've done a couple of those, and when somebody snatches your neck around, that's that can hurt. Uh, I remember watching Jake Roberts, another great worker that I enjoyed, that I tried to take stuff away from. I remember watching Jake Roberts work they had hoods on, so it was a blindfold match. And the psychology he used was so perfect. And he had the crowds in the palm of their hands. I can't remember, I think it was Mid South maybe. But, he would start walking the other way and the people would start, telling him which way to go, and he would point, and it was the psychology was just a masterpiece. So I guess it'd be a blindfold. I'd love to be able to do that kind of match with somebody.
Yeah. Is there any piece of merch that you have or had that has sold out pretty quickly?
When we went to Japan, it was me, D'Lo, and Umaga Eki. Um, we were all part of a group with another guy named Taokea who had been in Japan for a while, in all Japan. So Eki was, I think, was probably the first one. Said, "Man, we need to start, getting some merch over here." So we
Yeah.
would load our. He would get the stuff. He knew somebody that would make it, and we would meet in Atlanta, and we would scatter it out between all our bags so we could get it all in. So we would all drag 2 or 3 big bags full of merchandise every time we came, uh, and it was selling out. And then I think the office, kind of smartened up to it, and then they told us, hey, we'll make the merch and sell it for you, and we'll give you a cut. And you can kind of figure how that went. Our cut was enough to get a steak dinner out of probably. But we had all kinds of merchandise over there for the group, which was called ROD. We had dog tags, T-shirts. I mean, they were coming out with a new T-shirt every week, and it was selling good. So probably
Hmm.
there.
Is there any time a fan has seen you in public and got super surprised and or excited?
Yeah, it used to happen all the time especially when I was on TV in WWF. Uh, I would I would go out, to the grocery store or whatever, and people would recognize me, and I would always get the same question. They would say, "What are you doing down here?" And Carrollton, Georgia, and well, I live here, and well, we thought you lived out in L.A. or somewhere. No, I live right down the road. So, yeah, I mean, it was it was real crazy at that time because it was nothing that I was doing. It was just the strength of Vince's TV and the whole wrestling business at that time. I mean, it got to be where it was, it was kind of a hassle to go out, but I've always tried to keep life as grounded as I can. My wife does a good job of that, especially back then. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of crazy back then. People would see you and recognize you, but on the strength of the TV that we had.
Yeah. Who is your favorite horror character and favorite horror movie?
Um, the Exorcist. The Exorcist, it's still to this day, The Exorcist still scares the shit out of me. Um, and looking at it now, special effects were not that great, and and everything, but it's the whole thing just it really scared me to death as a kid, and I enjoy watching it every year when it comes on. I was a big fan of he just died recently. The Devil's Rejects. He was the clown. I can't remember his name. I was a big fan of his. I guess earlier on, when I was a kid, I was, of course, everybody liked Freddy Krueger. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was a Freddy Krueger guy.
Yeah. I liked Chucky.
Yeah, yeah. I liked of course, Jason too. And it was funny
Yep.
because later on, when I started wrestling, I did the Lord Humongous gimmick for Bob Armstrong over in Alabama a little bit. So it's kind of cool getting to be Jason.
Yeah. What is generally your favorite music to listen to in your spare time?
And that's a hard one. Believe it or not, I was a big rap fan. I have been since I was a teenager. I mean, I was listening to it when it was Run DMC and LL Cool J and all those guys, and I've listened to it ever since. Um, Big Southern rock guy. I like rock and roll in general, country. But I'm a big Southern rock guy. Leonard Skinner, Molly Hatchet. All those guys. But yeah, I don't really. I listen to a little bit of everything. My wife, it drives my wife crazy because I'll listen to rap one minute and then I'll switch it to country music and then I'll switch it to rock and roll, and I'm jumping all around the radio dial, and she likes to listen to something consistently, and I'm jumping all over the radio, so I don't usually
Yeah.
get to play with the radio when I'm riding with her.
If you got to choose the stipulation for your match, what stipulation would you choose?
uh Loser leave town. I always love the loser leave town matches because there was so much, especially back years ago. Kind of hard to do now. Well, I guess you could do it on the indie shows, but a little hard to do it on SmackDown or AEW or anything like that. But I always loved it, because when I first started watching wrestling, you did, this is the mid late '70s. You didn't know. I mean, you knew what was going on in your territory where you live, and some people might pick up, like sometimes I could pick up a station out of somewhere in North Carolina. I could see Mid Atlantic. And then I found the wrestling magazines at the supermarket one day. So I started learning that there were more, all the different places that had wrestling. And I always thought that was the loser leave town match, because you never knew when they were going to show up in another territory, or they were going to show back up under a mask, Dusty, the Midnight Rider. I love that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it'd be loser leave town, because they're gonna come back with a mask on.
Yeah. What was what has been the funniest thing a fan has said to you before?
Um, there again, my wife used to get on to me about it. It got to the point around here that like I say, it was kind of hard to go anywhere. Which I never minded the fans, getting autographs, taking pictures, whatever. I never minded, but sometimes when you're out with your family, you're just trying to get stuff done. We went through
Yeah.
a Burger King one day, and the guy that was waiting on us at the drive-through, he said, "You look just like Bull Buchanan. He's a wrestler." And I said, "Really?" I said, "People tell me that all the time, but and my wife would always get mad at me when I would do that. And, she always tell me, tell him the truth." So I would usually, but yeah, I'd have a little fun with people sometimes. I told one guy, he says, "You look just like Bull Buchanan." I said, "That's my brother." I said, yeah, that's my twin brother. I know him. I can get an autograph if you want. Just try to have fun. But I learned from Ray Traylor, Big Boss Man.
Mm,
He had a real well. He was just a good guy. I mean, he was a real nice guy, but he had this ability to make people feel comfortable around him. And I think because he knew that a lot of times to the fans, especially when you're up there, you're their hero. There's somebody you look up to, you enjoy, and they get nervous when they meet you. And Ray just had this ability to make people feel comfortable. He could tell when they were nervous, and he would make them feel at ease around him. And so I tried to learn, I tried to learn that from him, and I try to, especially you can tell when somebody's a little nervous, when they're wanting to meet you, So you try to crack a joke or do something funny, kind of make them feel at ease.
yeah. What has been a best fan compliment you have received either at like a show or convention?
I did a convention. I did a convention a few years ago in Newark, and the guy. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I've done a couple for him, and I think they're pretty big ones. But I asked him. We talked about flying me up and everything, and I asked him if he could get 2 tickets for the boys uh, because I wanted to show them New York City. So I brought my sons up there, and when we got to the building, uh, the uh, the promoter said, "Hey, I got 2 guys over here from England, and they said they came specifically to see you." And I mean, I didn't know what to say. Somebody would fly all the way from England. I mean, I'm sure. Scott Hall was there. I mean, it was a big convention, and I'm sure they didn't just come to see me, but and then they remembered seeing me over in England on one of the. I think I worked Kane on a pay per view from over there, from Sheffield maybe, and they were sitting in the bar, and all the guys were coming in the bar, and they said, "We remember you walked by. We were hoping you'd come back, but you walked by." And it was so weird because I actually remember walking by that bar and looking in there and seeing all, everybody had already got to their rooms and went down there. And I remember thinking to myself, I am too damn tired to do this tonight. And I went to my room and went to bed. But I actually remember walking by the bar and saying, hey,
Yeah,
I
wow.
was just too tired, jet lag. And I said, I got to go to bed. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, probably that. I mean, anybody that fly from England to see, you got to be, pretty appreciative of that.
definitely. Which wrestler has given you the best advice and or compliment?
There was a guy named Mike Jackson, wrestled here around Alabama and Georgia, and everybody, probably recognize him because he just wrestled on Impact here a few months ago. He's 73, 74 years old, and he's still out there just going. I mean, as good as he ever
Yeah.
did. But
Yeah.
when I first got going, I did a lot of stuff over in Alabama. I did a lot of stuff for Bob Armstrong, and Mike ran a lot of shows over there, and I did one for him, and then he kept bringing me back, and he used me, and I made a lot of money, as much on an indie level. I always made money with Mike, and he told me one time, he said when you start thinking about this as a business, you'll start making money. And looking back on it, he was right because when you think about this as a business, when you think about this from a you know when you let your heart make decisions for because you love what you do, you have a passion for this business, you do it for free, you do it out in the rain, you do it any chance you got. But when you let your head take over and start thinking about it, okay, I'm spending $50 worth of gas to make $20. When you start thinking of it as a business, just like he said, you start making money because you start making better business decisions. And at the end of the day, that's what this is. I mean, we all love it. We all, want to do it. I'd still, if my body could do it, I'd still be doing it. But, you
Yeah.
know, at the end of the day, it is a business. And then, I don't, just, you could go through down the list of guys that I've been with, tagged with, rode with, wrestled against, and I've tried to take something away from all of them. Anybody that was willing to give me advice or, make a suggestion, I always tried to, keep it back, filed back in the file somewhere, and use it when the time was right.
Mm-hmm. Did you like rather being a heel or babyface more in wrestling?
I like being a babyface more, actually. And most guys I know enjoy being heels. And it's weird because most of the time, guys who enjoy being heels are actually nice guys. It's almost like it's unless you be somebody that you want to be, but you're not. So
Yeah.
for most people, being a nice guy, you really want to sometimes just blow up on somebody, but you don't. Well, being a heel gives you that ability to do that. But for some reason, I enjoyed being a babyface. Another thing I think I don't know if I did it really well, but I was never too proud to do it, was sell. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the most important things in this business because somebody that knows how to sell and sells a match well, they make you believe, and that's what this is all about. People want to have their disbelief suspended for a little while. So, being a babyface allowed me to sell. The problem was, when you're my size, sometimes it's hard to get sympathy from people, but especially around here, people knew me and working, this indie stuff around here. I always worked as a babyface. I always enjoyed that more.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time in your career you ever got kicked out of a wrestling show you were wrestling at?
No, no, nothing I can think of. Probably some people that probably wished I had left, but no, no, I didn't. I remember being one of the times. I remember being a kid. I probably was 8 or 9 years old, and I was at Carrollton, Georgia. The Georgia Championship Wrestling. It was Saturday night. They were having matches there, and they had an intermission. And a lot of people that remember Georgia Championship will remember Freddie. I can't remember his last name, but Freddie something. He was an announcer for Georgia Championship. And I saw a bunch of the kids down there at the ring, and a couple of them had got up on the edge of the ring, and I was, this is my chance because at that point in my life, that was my number one goal, was to be able to actually get in a wrestling ring. So I saw my shot there, and I jumped up on the edge. Freddie Miller was his name, and he came by and said, "Get off that ring!" And I jumped down. It scared me to death, and I thought I was going to jail. So, that's probably. I thought I was going to get kicked out of the wrestling shows. I went and sat back down. I never got up again, but now, like I said, I mean, I can count on one hand the number of times I've had a dust up with anybody. And I think with all of them, I think, at some point, I went back and, tried to smooth things over or, when I saw them again, just try to, hey man, nothing personal.
Yeah. What would you do if a crowd member came out of the crowd and attacked you?
I can answer that one really good because that's happened before. When I was in Smoky Mountain, we were up there in those hills in Kentucky and Tennessee, and man, those people really believed in pro wrestling, even at that time in the early mid '90s. And I was part of Jim Cornette's army. It was me, Tommy Rich, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Landale. Well, they were turning Buddy. They were turning babyface. He cut just one of the best promos I've ever heard in my life. If you get a chance, go look it up. Buddy Landale in Smoky Mountain. He was wrestling Shawn Michaels. Jimmy already had a connection with WWF, so he brought Undertaker down to work with Glenn Jacobs, who at that time was Unabomber, but would become Kane. He brought Shawn Michaels down to work with Buddy, and they completed the babyface turn. I think it was Pikeville, Kentucky, and we jumped Buddy and we laid him out, and he was pouring blood everywhere, and we were putting the boots to him, and the people were already starting to get up close to the ring, and Jimmy waved the tennis racket and said, "All right, let's go." So, me and Tommy and Terry, we get out, we leave Buddy in there, just dead, a bloody heap. And we start walking down the aisle, and something told me that we were going the wrong way. And I was right behind Jimmy. And I tried to tell, I said, Jimmy, I think we're going the wrong way. And he said, what? I said, Jimmy, I think we're going the wrong way. He said, I know which way we're going. I said, all right, you're the boss. And we walked right into a corner of the corner of the gym, and there were no doors. It was a brick wall. There was no other way to go except what we just got out of. And by that time, the people had just closed up there was no aisle there anymore. The people had just covered it. So I turned around, I'm like, well, what do we do now? And Big Terry Gordy said, come on, bud, let's go. And he started walking through them, and one guy jumped out at him, and he slung him about 3 rows back. And from there, it was on. And we just pretty much fought our way back where we just come from, and then down the other aisle to get to the dressing room. But, I had Terry Gordy in front of me, so, I wasn't too worried about it at that point. I figured we could probably handle it.
Mm-hmm. Would you rather join DX, NWO, APA, or BWO?
APA all the way. We had so much fun working with those guys, me and Ray, and then later on me and Charles Godfather. We were friends, we were friends already, and so we didn't mind hitting each other, because we knew, you know, we all worked like that. It was a lot of fun, working with them, and those bar fights. We'd get there early, and of course, have a few of the bars drinks to get ready for the bar fight. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, fighting your buddies in a bar, with an open tab. So well, I had a lot of fun
Yeah.
with those guys, and that to me they had one of the greatest games. That was really a sad day, man. I remember watching it. That was a sad day when they shut the old APA door down. Uh, I really felt like a fan again almost. Damn, I hate to see that.
Would you rather join Four Horsemen or Evolution?
Ah, I'm a child of the '80s, man. Four Horsemen. Uh, they were they were the first real heels that kind of got over. Well, the Freebirds. Uh, you know, I was torn because I was a huge Von Erich fan, but I was also a huge Freebird fan. When they went to Texas, I remember thinking, now what? I like all of them. But yeah, Four Horsemen. They were such. I loved the Flair versus the Tully and Magnum and all the matches that they had, and I think Evolution was great, and it was a really good faction. But man, Four Horsemen, that's legendary.
Yeah. If you could have any band or singer perform your theme song, who would you want that to be?
Leonard Skinner, give me back my bullets, or maybe Freebird. Always wanted to come out to Freebird, but just never really. It's almost sacrilegious to come out to Freebird and not be a Freebird. But my son Brooks Jensen, when he was finishing up around here, the last few shows he did before he went to NXT, he used it sometimes, and so I got to walk out with him to Freebird, so that was good enough for me. But yeah, probably. Like I said, I'm a huge Southern rock fan. Um, Probably Freebird. I was a big fan of the Briscoe. I got to didn't get to work with them, but I got to do a few tours with them over in Japan, and those they were just good old country boys. But I love their whole the look, the gimmick, the whole thing, and especially that "Give Me Back My Bullets" just set it off.
Mm-hmm. What is the least favorite wrestling move to have happen to you?
Well, probably a swinging DDT off the top rope because I kind of messed up my neck on it. I was over in Japan, and it was no fault of the guy that gave it to me. I'd done it. We'd done it a million times. I've done it a million times. Just a tornado DDT. But I remember when I was going down, I was going to try to do it. I was going to try to do something different. Go figure. I tried to do something different, and I landed with my neck cocked sideways, and actually, I didn't know it at the time, but actually cracked the vertebrae in my neck. Uh, and that was like week one of a 4-week tour. So it was just misery, because really, really didn't have a whole lot of pain medication over there. Anything, I mean, morphine, but I couldn't really take that. So I just struggled through it and got back home, and never really did anything. But yeah, just one of those moves you took 1,000 times, and that's why I was trying to stress to Ben and Zach and all these other young guys. You can't take for granted. A friend of mine, a guy got to work a lot over there. Broke his neck and he's now paralyzed from the neck down off of a sunset flip. One of the first moves that I ever learned to do. It's so simple, a sunset flip. Uh, but something happened and he went head first into the mat, and he's in a wheelchair now.
Mm.
So it's always, usually it's the little stuff that you get so used to that you get lackadaisical on it, and then something bad happens.
Yeah. Yeah. What has been the hardest move you have tried to do on an opponent before?
Uh, I, like I said, I was pretty agile for a big guy, and I learned how to do a Frankensteiner. The problem was
Mm.
most of the guys that I would do it with were shorter than I was. So, I'd always drag my head off the mat or something. So then I learned to do it off the top rope, which gave me enough room to turn. But I remember doing it in a match one night. I think it was an enhancement match with somebody I was having, and the guy was maybe 5'10", 5'11", and I come back, and Ron Simmons was sitting there, Farouk, and uh, without directly telling me, he kind of let me know. What he told me was, just because you can do it doesn't mean you need to do it. Yes, I could do it, but it didn't look right. A 6'6" guy doing it to a guy that's 5'10". So sometimes I say that probably my strength would be my agility, but sometimes it almost got in my way because I would try stuff, that, yeah, I could do it, but it just didn't look right for a guy my size to be doing it. So
Yeah.
probably that.
What usually got you hyped for a match that you were going to be in?
Um, you know, I never really, I was around before for the earbud thing and iPhones and all that. So I really didn't have any music other than the music I come out to. So I always tried to use stuff that I liked. I would hear something. I would change my music every week sometimes just because I would hear something new and I think, oh, that's it. So I would let that music kind of, when you're standing back there behind the screen, I let that me down. Once I got WWE, the music they play wasn't really, and then the RTC with that god awful siren, Um, but out here, like in Japan, we always picked some music that we liked, and so I'd let the music get me up.
Yeah. What is your favorite thing to do after all your matches?
Well, if we're around here, go to Waffle House, and uh, you know, I like hanging out with the boys. I miss that probably more than anything. I can live without getting in the ring. Although I would, like I said, I would love to still be able to do it the way I did it. But man, I enjoy hanging out with the boys. Having a good time. The road trips to me were kind of the best thing. Especially when you were guys that you were friends with. Uh, so yeah, I mean, probably going out. A group of guys from the show. Some of your friends going out and eat. Break bread together and sit around and joke and have a good time and then hit the road again.
Yeah. What has been your favorite venue you have wrestled at so far in your career?
Madison Square Garden. I don't think you can, you know, there's nothing like the Madison Square Garden is old. Uh, a lot of people might say it's kind of run down. I mean, you can tell that it's not a new place; it's an old place. But that's exactly what makes it, the place that it is. When you walk down the hallways there, they've got pictures of all the of Muhammad Ali, of the all the championship basketball games that have been played there, all the concerts that have been there, all the Elton John, all the people that have been there before you. So there's just so much mystique to it there, and probably the Budokan in Japan. There again, so many good matches, that I've watched through the years, that took place there. I wrestled in Tokyo Dome, but to be honest with you, Budokan was always my favorite place. And I'd have to give a mention to Corgan Hall too. A lot of the guys that follow Japan wrestling, Corgan Hall's usually where a lot of the TV was done. It was usually where you started out the tour, and usually sometimes where you ended the tour. But yeah, those places probably. But at the top of the list, it had to be Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, definitely. Has there been any time you have accidentally broken out of, broken out of your wrestling persona?
Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. There's been a few times, different people over the years, do something funny or stupid, or and you can't help but laugh. And I mean, um, I think that I see a lot of where like where they try to make Taker laugh and stuff like that, and I think sometimes when you do that, it kind of shows people that that it's not all staged, it's not all predetermined. The ad lib stuff sometimes it does kind of make you chuckle, and everybody can see that. And, it comes across as being real because it is.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever gotten embarrassed in a wrestling match due to a mistake or something?
Oh God, yeah, yes. My son Zach just had a match maybe a month ago, and he tried to do the springboard clothesline from the top that I used to do, and he missed, botched it a little bit, but didn't get hurt, and the guys covered it really well. And he got back to the back, and I told him, I said, don't worry about it, kid. I mean, do it live on Monday Night Raw. If anybody wants to go back and look, it was a match with Kane. It was after WrestleMania with me and Boss Man and D'Lo and Godfather. Yeah, Monday Night Raw, the biggest Raw of the year, always, at the Raw after WrestleMania. And I go up to do it and slipped off the rope and fell right there at Kane's feet. And the funniest part was he stood there for a minute and just kind of looked down at me before he picked me up. And, but yeah, I remember there again, I remember getting back to the hotel and walking through the restaurant there, and JR was sitting there, and I walked up to him and I said, JR, I'm sorry. He said, what for? He's, I mean, it happens, but yeah, oh God. Yeah, it's hard to get up, knowing that you just botched something on, and with millions of people watching. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they don't even notice. So,
yeah, I noticed that one. That's kind of, but yeah, I did the same thing over in Japan. I think anytime you try to do stuff like that, you're always taking the chance of, it backfiring. But I mean, what's life if you don't take a few chances here and there?
hmm. What has been the scariest slash most dangerous incident in your wrestling career?
we were in Smoky Mountain, and well, maybe that one where we had to fight our way through the crowd, but we were in Smoky Mountain once again, and we were at a house show, and it was a small town. There was only one road in, one road out. It seemed like it was, you had to go out over this huge mountain. We were having a show, and I think it was the Headbangers were in the ring, and some guy off front row got up and grabbed maybe Chaz's foot and tried to yank him down off the edge of the ring. And Chaz turned around and came down on him with the hammer. I mean, the hammer of the gods. I mean, he looked like Thor coming down and just cracked him right in the head and laid him out. And blood was pouring everywhere. And I think everybody in that building probably must have been related to the guy because they all got pissed. The match, the referee got the match done, got him out of the ring. Buddy Landale was running the show that night. I don't think Jimmy was there. And Buddy was running the show, and we still had a battle royal to do. Buddy said, let's get it, get in and get out quick as we can. So we ran out there. Everybody got thrown out, ran back out. As we were leaving, the people were starting to kind of crowd around the cars, and I think that some of them even like cornered maybe D-Lo and somebody else, whoever was riding. I'm pretty sure it was D-Lo. I think kind of cornered them down there for a while before the cops got there. But yeah, we had to cut and run on that one because those people were they were going home to get their pitchforks and come after us, I think.
What has been the worst you've gotten injured in a match?
Oh, my neck over in Japan. That was that one really slowed me down. After that, I kept, that was in probably 2005, and I kept going to Japan until 2010 or 2011, and then I continued to work on the Indies over here. But it took almost a year for me to. And like I said, I'm not. It's not that I'm proud of it, but I'm not really a doctor guy. I got a real good friend who is a doctor, but I just don't like going to see him on a professional basis. So, I just rehabbed it best I could. I had a chiropractor here in town and a masseuse, and I would go there every day just about it and let them work on me. And it took a good year for me to get, a good bit I never got full strength back in my arm, but that really slowed me down. We kept going. Me and D-Lo went to NOAA. We worked over in NOAA, and it didn't really. I say it slowed me down. It didn't really slow me down in the ring. I could never. I was never as big or as that side that on one arm just never came back full strength. So it was hard for me to. I don't say stay in shape, but the kind of shape that I was in when I was in WWE. I was pushing 300 pounds. And with abs, and it just made it real hard after that.
Mm-hmm.
My win was, it didn't affect that or anything, but it was kind of hard to stay in that, have that WWE kind of look.
Mm-hmm. What has been the worst pain you have caused on your opponent before?
Oh God, you'll probably have 400 people writing in to say, what I did to them. I admit, I work a little snug. That's the way I was trained. But I don't mind. I kind of expect it back. Uh, but I've never meant it as any kind of ill will or just trying to be a jerk or anything like that. I just always thought that especially with guys our size, if you don't lay it in, it just looks horrible. But I remember working in OVW, and me and later on he was one of the Basham brothers, but down there he was a damager. We were working together, and somehow or another, I thought he was doing one thing, and I think he was it was my fault. He was doing something, and I thought he was doing something else, and he went to roll off my back, and I gave him a boost that I wasn't supposed to, and he landed right on top of his head. And I thought I killed him. I turned around, and uh, but he was fine. He got up, and we finished the match. He said his neck was a little sore afterwards, but yeah, we you have to put a lot of trust in each other because quite literally we're putting our health in each other's hands.
Mm-hmm.
you know, you don't have to like the guy. You don't have to like him at all. You don't have to have any kind of relationship other than a business relationship. But you got to be careful with this stuff because, like I said, you can get hurt really bad, really quick, and it's usually on the simple stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
I thought I broke Damage's neck, but yeah, he was okay.
Back then, if you got told that you couldn't medically wrestle for the rest of your life, what would you do?
I'm sorry, what was it? Say again. Broke up a little bit there.
Back then, if you got told you couldn't medically wrestle for the rest of your life, what would you do?
Oh, back then I would have probably tried to, do something in the office, maybe, work as a trainer or a backstage agent, something like that. Um, yeah, I mean, that would have been a tough one, and I've seen it happen. It happens really easily. Um, but yeah, I'd probably tried to. I've always kind of been more toward the coaching side. Um, I enjoy. I mean, somebody was nice enough and thought enough of me to pass all of this knowledge on to me. The way I see it, I'm kind of obligated to pass it on to as many people as I can. What little I know. Like I said, I mean, I've never claimed to be, Ric Flair or anybody like that, but I think a lot of guys, a lot of good guys, and a lot of guys that really knew what they were talking about and knew what they were doing, um, passed a lot of knowledge on, and I like doing that with younger guys.
Yeah, definitely. What is the longest you have had to stay out of action for wrestling?
Uh, Knock on wood. I never really did. I have been very fortunate to stay injury free. I've never blowed out any knees or elbow, shoulders, anything like that. I hurt my neck over in Japan, but I was in the ring the next night. I've just always, I've always looked at it as they were counting on me to be there. And of course, I mean, like I said, I've been lucky. I haven't had to, uh, like Hunter tearing his quad muscle off, or stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Billy Gunn, just ripping his stuff that I saw with my own eyes when I was there. Billy Gunn ripping his shoulder apart. I've been lucky and not had that. So I've been able to, if they had me booked, I was there, and I did my job.
Yep. Were you there for when Draws got permanently injured?
No, I wasn't, and I'm kind of glad. We'll see the stuff like that. But I know that it affected D'Lo. I know it still affects him. Uh, that's like I was saying with Damager. My heart stopped because I thought I just broke this guy's neck. I don't think anybody wants that on their conscience. I mean,
Yeah.
but uh, I've talked about it with D'Lo before. Like I said, we were together for years over in Japan. And I know he don't like to talk about it, but we talked about it a few times, and I think neither one of them really knows what happened. It was just and they'd done it 100 times before, but it just on that night somehow or another he didn't get up, or he wasn't able to sit up, far enough, and kind of came down on his head, you know, and unfortunately he just passed a little while back, about a month
Mm-hmm.
ago. But yeah, he was another guy. I mean, I knew him. He was a real good dude.
Yeah. What are some of the wrestling championships and achievements you have won so far in your career?
Oh God, a bunch of stuff out here on the Indies, and I say that, and I don't mean it, that I don't mean that disrespectfully. Yeah, I've always thought that no matter how big, if it's a promotion if they're a promotion that runs at a flea market and they draw 20 people, if they put the belt on you, you know, it means something to them because it means that you're representing their company. And that's the way I've
Mm-hmm.
always looked at it. But, some of the I guess the bigger stuff, you know, I was, I was, um, tag team champion down in Memphis a few times, and that was a big thing to me because I grew up watching Memphis wrestling. That was that was a big deal to me. I think it was the Mid South uh, tag team championships at the time. Um, you know, OVW, and of course, WWE. You get to be any kind of world champion. You get to be in at the top of our business, which was WWE. That's always an honor. Me,
Definitely.
I was a tag team champion over in All Japan with Rico Constantino. D'Lo was out of the country for a few months, and uh, they brought in Rico, and me and Rico won the All Asian belts there. And then, be honest with you, I mean, it'd be hard not to say that winning the WWE Tag Team Championships is not the epitome. But I mean, a pretty close second would be when me and D'Lo went over to Noah, and we got to have the GHC tag belts for a little while. I tell everybody, and I think D'Lo would agree with me. At that time, in the between probably 2007 and 2010, I think Pro Wrestling Noah had one of the uh, as far as pro wrestling goes, one of the most talented rosters of anywhere in the world. You had Bobby Fish, you had the Briscoes, you had uh, Doug Doug Williams, you had Eddie Edwards. Brian Danielson was coming over there. They was just a lot of talent, because they had a working relationship with ROH at the time. So everybody was in our Claudio and Chris Hero. That was just, man, that roster was stacked. And not
Mm-hmm.
including the Japanese guy, Morishima, Yoni, Marufuji, Kenta. I mean, that thing was just, if you wanted to see pro wrestling, that to me, that was the place to be then. So, yeah, that's some of the bigger ones, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like you are worthy enough to be part of like a wrestling hall of fame, like WWE?
I don't know. It's fun to hear people say that, oh, you all be in the Hall of Fame, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think probably the biggest impact I had or we had when I was up there was probably the RTC, just because of the irony of it. Just how, like, 20 years later, it's almost like we actually won. What we what we were trying to do, it kind of got done. So I guess if anybody was to ever consider me for that, it would probably be that faction. Uh, which I see a lot more, people talking about it that nowadays, than they used to. But yeah, it would be a great honor, of course. I would love it, but I don't, I don't see myself like that.
Who are 5 wrestlers you would put into the WWE Hall of Fame that are not in there yet that you think deserve it?
Uh, you know, I think Muda got in there. I think last year, Muda got
Yep.
in, and I'd really like to see him induct a few more of the Japanese guys, because even though they may not have worked for Vince, I think the WWE Hall of Fame is kind of the epitome of of a Hall of Fame. I know that a lot of times, like they take celebrities in and stuff like that, but as far as recognition goes, it's probably one of the top ones. I'd love to see, like Mr. Baba. I think Antonio Inoki got inducted a few years ago, but some people like that. Tenru, Tenru actually worked for Vince. Uh, a few more of the Japanese guys. I'd like to
Yeah.
see them just, to celebrate, guys that actually didn't work there, but the contributions that they made to the sport in other ways, I'd like to see some of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. What are 4 words you would describe your wrestling persona?
Uh, Big, tough, not a whole lot to say, but took care of business in the ring. I guess I was always kind of what I was portrayed as. I mean, I think from the time I met Vince and we first sat down together, that's how he always saw me, was just this big killer uh, that didn't talk a lot, but did his talking in the ring, that kind of thing. That's how he always explained my character to me, whatever it was. Uh, from Truth Commission to me and Ray to the RTC to even the B Square thing. Anytime I ever talked to Vince and asked him, hey, which way you want to go with this, he always told me the same thing. Be you, be who I want you to be. This big killer, and so as I always tried to do that.
Yeah. What are 3 things that annoy you the most in wrestling?
Uh, People slapping their leg. Uh, um, seeing guys, and I understand, you got a lot of guys on the roster, and there's only so many spots you get, but I really hate to see guys that have a lot of talent and have something to give the business not get used the way that that they should be. Like I say, they can only be one top spot, and they can only be though it goes down the pecking order after that. But you just there's always guys that that have the perfect example, L.A. Knight. You know, to me, they've been sleeping on that guy a long time. I mean, I've watched him for a long time now, and I've just never understood why they couldn't find something for him to do. And now it's kind of just organically, the one thing I always tell people, especially the young guys, another thing I always tell them is the cream is going to rise to the top sooner or later. You can't keep talent down. You can try, but sooner or later, uh,
Mm-hmm.
RVD was a guy that, I don't know that he was booked as well as he could have been, but never, he was always got the same kind of crowd reaction. The crowd loved him. Didn't matter what they did with him. He was always over. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, there's only so many spots you can fill, but you always hate to see guys that fall through the cracks. That and just not, you know, and nobody in mind or in particular, but not taking the business seriously. Uh, that really that really chaps, and I think it does anybody that does this for a living. And there's nothing. I got no disrespect for anybody that anybody that's a weekend warrior. If I had got into this and done it for years and just never made it, to anywhere special, just was a big fish in a small pond, around in this area, I'd have still been happy because I got to do what I, wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not I ever got to the top or not. But, you know, uh, uh, when you do this for a living, it puts a different light on it. And when you see people disrespecting or not taking it seriously, I mean, we all try to have a good time, but when somebody is not taking the business seriously, that really burns me.
Yeah. What are 3 things that you like the most about wrestling?
Oh, you know, I love the smell of walking into an arena, the smell of popcorn, and I'm, like I said, I'm a child of the '70s. I like walking in and smelling the cigarette smokes floating in the air, and the smell of the popcorn, just the whole ambiance of that whole thing. I love the I love the physicality of it. Uh, I enjoy playing football. I did a lot of sports when I was growing up. but it's always fun to me to get out there and mix it up with your friends, and try to keep it on a friendly level, uh, and just the crowd, the fans.
Yeah.
There's nothing like there will never be anything else in my life that will ever come close to that feeling when you walk out there in Madison Square Garden or in the Houston Astrodome or in the Staples Center, and the crowd reacts to you, whichever way, whether they're cheering for you or booing for you, it doesn't matter. When you hear that crowd reaction, I mean, that's a drug in itself, and that might be one of the most powerful drugs, because how many guys, I mean, um, have went well past their prime with doctors and friends and family, just hanging off their coattail, begging them not to do this anymore. It's hard. It's hard to let it go. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Like there again, I try to tell these young guys, enjoy it while you can, because one day it's going to be over, and sometimes it's over very quickly.
Yep. If you are upset during or before a match, what do you do to help yourself calm down?
Uh, I mean, just walk around a little bit, maybe get a little fresh air. I say I've never had a problem with anybody, but there's always times, you get things can get a little heated, and I've always thought that, you know, instead of storming in there and saying what's on my mind that second, I've always tried to, maybe take a detour, walk around a different way, a little longer way, and kind of think about things before I go in there and, stick my foot in my mouth, or say something stupid, or, say something I don't really mean, Um, but yeah, I try to think before I let my mouth run away.
Yeah. I bet you wrestled almost everywhere in your career, but if you could wrestle anywhere in the world, where would that be?
Crazy as it sounds, I always wanted to wrestle in Russia.
Mm.
I always wanted to do a match in Russia, and the reason being, growing up in the '70s and '80s, that was our number one, political military rival, and you know, kids kids from my era, you never thought that you would ever be able to go to Russia unless you were going in a military transport. You were going to fight there or something. So once things opened up with Russia, I've always wanted to go there, and I thought, how cool would that be to be able to do a pro wrestling match over there, and I came close to getting to do it, but it didn't work out that way. Rikishi had a promotion going over in Italy for a while, and me and D'Lo went over and worked for him. And they actually ran a show in the old Roman Coliseum. And I thought, man, how great would that be to be in there in a ring, in a combat sports atmosphere where the Roman arena where the gladiators fought.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever wrestled or done anything in Wisconsin before?
I'm sorry, with who?
Have you ever wrestled or done anything in Wisconsin before?
Oh yeah, yeah, uh, yeah. We used to do Raw and SmackDown in Green Bay. That was always fun because that was another thing. I was, a big football mark. So, getting to see Lambeau Field, that was always fun. But yeah, we used to, God, we got up in a blizzard up there one time, me, Teddy Long, and Godfather. Actually, we were driving to Green Bay. I think it was a house show, though it wasn't a TV, it was a house show. And, it was just, it was a blizzard for us, but apparently to everybody else up there, they were just going on about their way. But, we thought that Snowmageddon was happening, and everybody else was just, no big deal.
Yeah, Green Bay is only like 40 minutes away from me.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What has been like the best fan art you have received in your wrestling career?
Um, I had a guy. We had a guy over in Japan that did little caricatures of us, and he did one of me. At the time, I was wearing a hood out to the ring. Part of our the leader of our group was Taka Michinoku, and I would wear a hood out to the ring, and he would pull the hood off of me, and I'd run around like a crazy man a few times, and that kind of stuff. And he did a caricature of all of us, me, Eki, D'Lo, and gave them to us, and I've still got it here at the house. Probably that.
Yeah. Which wrestler has the best wrestling gear ever, in your opinion?
Great Muda. Great Muda. He had some of the most extravagant, and a lot of it was just he came back from Mexico one time. He did a tour down in Mexico. He came back from Mexico and he had an Aztec themed outfit, and he wrestled as the. Uh, for people that don't know, the Great Muda was a different uh, character from Muto. Kenji Muto was Muda with no paint, no mask, just him wrestling. But
Yep.
the Great Muda gimmick was the kind of the the mask and the paint and all that. But he came back and he had an Aztec themed outfit, and I heard they spent like $15,000 on it.
Oh wow.
But it had a light. He had a light at the top of the mask, and the light would shine up all the way to the top of the arena. So his entrance was just grand. I remember Eki saying, he said something to the effect of, "I wonder how much of that 15,000 we helped pay for." But yeah, Muda always had the best gear to me.
Yeah. Did you eat certain meals before your matches?
Nothing in particular. I tried not to eat too close before we went out, but catering was always so good in WWE. That was one of the high points was the catering, and then I got over to Japan and I was kind of skittish at first. I was kind of trying to just find a McDonald's and eat there, but once I opened my mind up a little bit and started trying stuff over there, I fell in love with the food over there. So yeah, nothing in particular. Just always tried to stay on somewhat of a clean diet.
Mhm. What is a top go-to beverage most of the time for you?
Well, here lately, water used to be Diet Coke, but yeah, I'm trying to stay healthy. Getting a little older, so trying to stay healthy. So now it's just water. But I used to drink Diet Cokes. I don't know how I didn't just fall over dead from dehydration because I'd go for days without drinking water. I just fill up on Diet Cokes. But yeah, it was my go-to back in the day. That and a cup of coffee. I mean, that's always that's got to be the first thing in the morning. I don't do well without my coffee.
Yeah. What is your favorite current and old wrestler's theme song from WWE?
Oh, Kevin. Oh, okay. Well, WWE. Uh, I guess it'd have to be when the short time that the Freebirds were there, Bad Street. But as far as just wrestling music, without a doubt, either Freebird, the Freebirds, of course, Freebird by Leonard Skinner, or Stranglehold by Ted Nugent. Kevin Von Erichs. I thought that was the greatest babyface entrance song of all time. Stranglehold with Ted Nugent.
Yeah. What is your least favorite theme song from WWE?
That siren that we used to come out to as the RTC. That was the most annoying thing, and I think it helped us get a lot of heat because even if you had no idea who we were or what we were about or what we did, as soon as that siren started going off, you just automatically got in a bad mood. Um, that siren was horrible, but like I say, I think it helped get us the heat that we got.
Yeah. If you could go back and revisit any year of your wrestling career, what year would that be?
Uh, it'd be hard not to say probably 2000, 2001, 2002, right? Right there. But yeah, at the same time, I look back on it now. I'm 56. You know, been in the business since the early '90s, and I look back on it now, and I know I told Ben Brooks Jensen, I know I told him, but some of the best times I had was when I was, making no money and just struggling to get by, uh, because it was still more, it was fun back then. It wasn't so much of a business. I didn't
Yeah.
have all the responsibilities I had later on. It was nothing just to find out that there was a show going somewhere and get an invite and just on wing and a prayer, head out there with $20 in your pocket and just hope for the best. Those were some of the best times, and everything was still new also. So probably 2000, 2001, but I'd have to say also, I think anytime when you first break in, to me, it was just you were living a dream, you were having fun, and you know, so.
Yeah. If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
Uh, I don't know. You probably have to ask my wife that. uh, uh, I don't know. Like everybody else, I got my quirks. I think probably one of the big things I do, and I hate that I do it, but I think everybody does it to an extent. I try to put on a good face, especially in public. If something rubs me the wrong way, I try not to, just blow up, go off the handle or anything like that. But when I get home, the people at home usually hear about it more than the people that actually put me in that bad mood do. So, yeah, I know I'm guilty of that. I think probably a lot of us are. But, you get around the people you're comfortable with, which is your family, and you kind of open up, and sometimes it comes out, a little hard. So, somebody pisses you off at the store and then you come home and you bellyache to your wife about it. I guess that's the best way to describe it. They have to hear all the stuff that nobody else does.
Yeah. What is the first thing you think about doing to your opponent as the match starts?
Uh, well, my thing was always, a big killer. So right off the bat, I wanted to outmuscle the guy. That's usually the way I tried to set the match up was, me outpowering the guy, and then to have him outthink me to get around, the obvious discrepancy in our size. To me, that was always the easiest story to tell. Was David and Goliath. The big
Mm-hmm.
giant guy against the smaller guy. It's as old as humankind. It's the ultimate underdog story. So yeah, I always just tried to show off my strength, right off the bat, and then let them kind of figure out a way around it.
Mm-hmm. What would be your dream animal of having?
Uh, you know, I always thought it'd be cool to have a monkey. I've
Mm.
seen, I always, I always thought it would be a barrel of laughs to have a monkey around. But now you see some of the stuff you see, where those things go nuts and, rip people's arms off and stuff. I had a, I had an encounter with a monkey over in Japan. Mia and Tao Kea, we were out. I think we were in Roppongi, which is like the party section of Tokyo. And we had stopped by Starbucks and got some coffee, and we walked into they had a pet store there, and we just walked in looking around. And I mean, in Japan, a lot of the pets are small. A lot of the dog breeds are small because most people live in small apartments. It's crowded. Tokyo, one of the biggest cities in the world. But they had a monkey in there, and I remember we were walking up and we were looking at the monkey, and the monkey reached out through the cage, grabbed the straw out of my. I think I had a frappuccino. Grabbed the straw out of it, licked all of the frappuccino off of it, rubbed it on his butt, and then threw it back at me. And it didn't make me mad. I mean, I was I was bent over laughing. I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. So, I could always imagine having a monkey around, to do some stuff like that. So, I guess a monkey. I mean, we got dogs and cats. One of my dogs lives here now. Yeah, it's actually a Brooks Jensen's dog. He got it right before he
Oh,
went to NXT. Yeah, he got it and took it down there with him. And we told him, I said, it might be a lot, because you're going to be over there at the training center a lot. You're not going to have a lot of time to. And I think maybe our first trip down there, he said, "Hey, you think maybe you could?" Yeah, we'll take it back with us. But she's part of the family, just like the rest of them. But yeah, I always wanted a monkey.
yeah, I want a monkey too. If you could entrance with any animal, what animal would that be?
I, I don't know if it'd be a monkey. I always thought I saw. I remember watching Jerry Lawler when I was a kid, watching Jerry Lawler come out in Memphis on a horse. I always thought that would be the greatest way to come out, on a horse.
Yeah. What is your favorite wrestling quote?
Uh, there again, Freebird Mark, uh, bad street. The further down you went, the badder it got, and we lived in the last house on the right. That either that or Dusty Rhodes, dining with kings and queens. I've eaten pork and beans. I love
Yeah.
I love the stuff they were able to do back. I used to love to see Dusty Rhodes come out with a Willie Nelson shirt on, or stuff like that. The stuff you can't do anymore. Because of copyrights and all that kind of stuff. They had so much freedom. Back in the music they could come out to. You kind of pick your own music. I always admired the freedom that they had back then.
Yeah. If you could come up with your own quote, what would that be?
Ooh, yeah, it's not my quote, but just something I've heard. Live for the moment. Uh, you can spend your whole life, looking back at the past or worrying about what's going to happen for the future, and you totally miss what's going on now. I remember being on the plane the last time I left Japan, and I remember it, thinking for just a second, man, what if this is the last time you ever come over here? And actually it was. And I just I think about like I said, I wish I took more pictures. I'd love to have some of those times that were just kind of a flash in the pan then. Now that you look back on, was like, wow, man, that was something special.
Yeah. Would you ever forgive your opponent if they injure you?
Yeah, as long as it wasn't intentional. I mean, You know, well, I take that back. One of the greatest wrestling quote I believe I've ever heard was William Regal. I hit hard in safe places. Um, I think that is one of the truest things that one of the best ways to describe. I think the way I work, but the way a lot of the guys work. I hit hard in safe places. So as long as anything was intentional or they were taking liberties or anything like that. Yeah, it's not ballet. You get hurt doing it, and it's easy. Uh, so yeah, but
Yep. If you could manage any wrestler right now, who would you want to manage?
uh, probably Brooks Jensen. I think I'm gonna get to manage my son tomorrow night. So or at least walk out with him. So yeah, like I said, I grew up watching the Von Erichs. I thought that was one of the greatest stories in professional wrestling. Just their family and the way that the boys came along, and uh, you know I always dreamed that man, it would be great, to have 4 or 5 boys that wanted to do this and followed in the footsteps, and so yeah, I guess it would be I guess it be my boys. I'd love to. I'd love for one day to be able to manage them as a tag team. Even if it was just a one-off somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
that would be.
If back in the day you could choose anyone to manage you, who would you want that to be?
Jim Cornette. I was I'm a Cornette guy. He managed me in the Smoky Mountain, and Jim Cornette was a huge part of my career. He gave me a lot of breaks. He got me a lot of breaks. Uh, he never told me anything. He never gave me any advice or told me anything to do that wasn't spot on. Uh, so yeah, I would have I would have loved to have wrestled, in the Mid South for Bill Watts. I would love to have been around at that time. I hate it, that I actually had a chance to get into wrestling a little earlier when I was 18, but I chose to go to college, and I had a chance to play a little basketball, so I chose that. Looking back on it, I don't know. Part of me wishes I had, but then again, I don't know if I could handle the lifestyle back then at 18. Um, I mean, it was definitely a different lifestyle than it is now. It was a lot wilder and crazier, and probably maybe a lot more fun. But being 18, and I don't know if I could have handled that. I might have got burnt out pretty quick, but it's been a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would love to have worked in the territories, and gotten managed by Cornette back then.
Mhm. How did you come up with most of like your wrestling names that you had?
Well, a lot of times they came up with them for me. I started out, and I don't. I think I'd heard somebody, or there was a songwriter. He wrote a few songs for the Eagles. His name was J.D. Souther, and I remember thinking to myself, J.D. Southern. So when I first started wrestling, I was J.D. Southern, and and then I went to North Georgia Wrestling, and I was Sam McGraw. I was a cowboy from somewhere out in Texas. I wore a mask. Cornette came up with the Punisher name, and I always thought that when I first got there, I thought that it was the Punisher from the character from comic books, and then Cornette actually told me it was Punisher was Gene Simmons' bass guitar. That was the name of it,
Oh wow.
and that's where he came up with the Punisher. Yeah, because that was my entrance music, "God of Thunder" by Kiss or Gene Simmons.
Oh
And then Cornette actually came up with Bull Buchanan when I went to work for him in OVW. He came up with Bull Buchanan. Um, so yeah, I mean, most of the time it was somebody else coming up with a name for me, but yeah, the one I came up with was J.D. Southern, and I came out to the ring in a cowboy hat, and just kind of did the. I was a big fan of the Wild Eyed Southern Boys, Tracy Smothers and Steve Armstrong. I was a huge fan of them, and I kind of based that character off of that. I even came out to their music, "Train Train" by Blackfoot. Uh, so yeah, that was the one I came up with, was the original. But most of them after that, somebody else did.
yeah. Is there any background or inspiration off of your wrestling persona, Bull Buchanan?
Well, like I said, Jim Cornette came up with that, and the original Bull Buchanan he was a convict out on work release from the state penitentiary there in Kentucky, and Kenny Bolin was my manager, and somehow or another it got twisted. It got swapped around when I got called up to Bull Buchanan was a prison guard with a big boss man. But the original Bull Buchanan character, yeah, was a convict that was out on work release. Kenny Bolin had got me out on work release, to take care of whatever he needed to take care of. But yeah, that was it.
Yeah. If there is anything you would change about your wrestling style, what would that be?
Uh, I always watch my matches, and I never think I look good or I move good, or I always hate to see. I hate to watch myself run. So I guess if I had to change something, it'd probably be something like that. Just things other people probably don't notice, but I see it and I'm just, I cringe because I don't know. I guess everybody's like that a little bit to an extent.
Yeah. If you went for your finisher or signature move and it didn't work, do you have a plan B to do it right away after?
Oh yeah. For years I used the leg drop off the top rope for a finish. Um, I always had the scissor kick in the back. I use that sometimes for a finish. But yeah, if something had went bad on that, my go-to was always just snatch them up and give them a big clothesline. If something happened on the finish got kind of wonky or whatever, that was my go-to. Just snatch them up and clothesline them and be done with it.
Yeah. If you could dump any type of food and beverage on your opponent, what food and beverage would that be?
Uh, I don't know. I've turned a few trash cans over on folks and not realizing that they were full of banana peels and half drank cokes and tobacco spit and stuff like that. Um, Felt bad about that. Um, I don't know. Food wise, I always thought the Brood had the one of the greatest entrances in pro wrestling or sports entertainment. When they first came out, the Brood, with that music and when they would dump the blood down on their opponents. I always thought that was just that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. What has been the worst weapon you've got beat slash hit with in a match?
Uh, we did a thing when I was in OVW. Jim Cornette got a deal with some guys out in Las Vegas. They wanted to put on a wrestling show. It was two computer companies. I think it was Cisco and I can't remember the other one, but it was me and Flash Flanagan against Nick Dinsmore and I think it might have been Rico. It was Rico Constantino. Um, and so they were having their company convention in Las Vegas that year, and the theme of it was, they were supposed to, Cisco was laying smackdown on, might have been Dell computers, something like that. So they ordered all these props from Hollywood, the fake glass, the candy glass bottles and stuff like that, but they had computer keyboards. So we're out there in the match and we're wearing each other out with this stuff. And I can't remember if it was Nick or Rico. One of them hit me with that doggone computer board, and I think they misplaced the one that was supposed to be there with a real one because it didn't budge, and it it felt like somebody had dropped a bomb on my head. All the other stuff was rigged to fall apart, but that damn computer pad, man, and he hit me hard enough to where it knocked all the keys out. I remember looking down at the mat, and there was 2 or 3 of the computer keys laying down there. Shit, I don't want to do that again. But yeah, probably that.
What are your hobbies other than wrestling?
Oh, I don't get to do a whole lot of it, but I enjoy hunting. I love to go fish. Uh, I still enjoy getting in the weight room. Working out, try to stay in shape. But yeah, I mean, most of the time I just like to kick back and relax. We got a little place out here in the woods. You know, very very secluded and off the beaten path. That's the way I like it. So a lot of days if I ain't got nothing to do, I just sit out on the porch and watch the birds or the squirrels or something.
Yeah. Who would you put in your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers?
Flair, Hogan, probably Rocky and Austin.
If you had one last match, like a retirement match, who would you want it to be against?
I actually had a retirement match, and like everybody else, I've come back since then. But in 2014, I started working for the sheriff's department here where I live, and I started out as a jailer. And once I went to police academy, I was a mandated sheriff's deputy. I thought it be a little more, might be kind of inappropriate to be a deputy out on the road and still wrestling. So I actually had a retirement match here in my hometown. It was at my old high school gym where I played basketball. The sheriff's department down here helped us out a good bit with some plane tickets and stuff like that. And I brought D'Lo in. It was me and D'Lo against two of the guys I've worked around here for a long time, AJ Steele and Brad Lynch. And we got to go out. I got to go out with my friends. Now, fast forward, once Ben started wrestling, Brooks Jensen started wrestling. I always knew that even when I retired, and I did retire, but I knew that if the boys got into it, I would want to do something with them. So I saved up a few matches, and me and Ben did a few matches, and I actually did a match with Zach. I might have one or two more in me, toward the end. When if he gets ready to, kind of fly the coop like Ben did, and go somewhere, I probably still have a match or two left in me that I could do with him.
Yeah. Who would you consider as a brother and sister in wrestling?
Oh, well, a lot of brothers. I mean, you have a lot of people you meet. You have acquaintances, but very few friends. D'Lo Brown was always a friend in business. Ray was Godfather. A lot of guys. I mean, it'd be hard to just even name a few. Ron Simmons. A lot of the older guys that kind of took me under their wing. Rikishi took me under their wing, helped me out. Told me what to do, told me what not to do. Tommy Rich. Guys like that. I think I was so lucky because I feel like I kind of bridged a generation, from that older generation, the Tommy Riches and Wrestling Twos, to the newer generation, Rocky and Austin and those guys like that. But we all got to learn from those guys, the Tommy Riches, the Arn Andersons, the Jerry Lawlers, the Bob Armstrongs, those guys were all around down here, and we got to learn from them. And I mean, you couldn't ask to learn from a better group of guys.
Yeah. If you could wrestle or have a segment with any actor, who would you want that to be?
Uh, Probably Matthew McConaughey. I'd love to, I'd love to do something with that guy. That would be so much fun. We actually got to do something with Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler turns out was a wrestling fan, and when we were with RTC, I think he was promoting his new movie, Little Nicky. It was something to do. He was the son of the devil or something like that. And of course, the RTC, we had to stick our nose into it, but we got to do something with him, and it was. I mean, Adam Sandler. I mean, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. If you could guest star in any TV show and or movie, which would it be?
Probably now it'd be Yellowstone. I probably have to do it pretty quick because it sounds like they're wrapping it up. But man, I fell in love with that. My wife has to talk me. I keep telling her we're going to move out to Montana, and she has to keep talking me out of it. But yeah, I love the whole. I think anytime, most of the kids from my generation, you either wanted to grow up and be a cop or a cowboy or a fireman or something like that. Mine was always a cowboy. Outside of being a pro wrestler, but yeah, I'd love to, Yellowstone.
Yeah. Out of all of the wrestling promotions you have wrestled for, which one has been your favorite?
Probably Smoky Mountain. Probably Smoky Mountain. Smoky Mountain was exactly what I thought the wrestling business would be when I was growing up. I had this vision in my head of traveling throughout the South. Because that's where I'm from. I had this vision of traveling, to all these places, Knoxville, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia. And when I got to Smoky Mountain, it was exactly what I thought it would. And all the guys, a lot of the guys I watched growing up, Tommy Rich and Terry Gordy were my partners. Buddy Landell, all the Armstrongs were there. Um, Dirty White Boy, Rock and Roll Express, all those guys were there. So to me, it was just like, it was what I envisioned wrestling being.
Yeah. Have you ever been interested or asked to go back to WWE to do like the WWE reunions or anniversaries that they have here and there?
I did I did that thing with John. I think it was in 2011. John Cena with the "Here's Your Life" kind of thing. I did that, and that was a lot of fun. Um, but no, I still talk to Stevie occasionally, and I think he brought up, maybe there was some talk about bringing the RTC back for a Royal Rumble or something like that. Of course, of course I would do it. We'd love to, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm always game to do anything. I went down a few months. I think September of last year, I went down and did a guest coaching thing down at the Performance Center. That was a lot of fun meeting, a lot of the new kids coming in. So yeah, do something like that.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna have to jump off here. I gotta
All right.
run something real quick,
Can
but
I
hey, I
ask you
really
one more question?
enjoyed doing this. Yo, sure, yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any advice for me to become a wrestler?
Yeah, I've said it a lot, and I think most of the people I've said it to probably, listen to me, because a lot of them that I told that wound up making it. But you can't let anybody outwork you. You can't let anybody outwork you. You find when you walk in, when I walk in somewhere, or previously, I guess, I'd make a point to find the person that was working the hardest, and he's not easy to, he's easy to find. He's the guy that's over in the corner doing Hindu squats, or, doing extra reps while everybody else is catching their breath. And that's the guy I've got to outwork. And so that's my mission, uh,
Yeah.
outworking. If you just outwork everybody, like I said, talent rises to the top, cream always. It always comes to the top, and you can't keep talent down.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for taking your time out and doing this.
All right, no problem. Anytime, buddy.
All right.
See you.
Talk to you later.